It started with a phone call I never wanted to get, right in the middle of a day I'd dreamed of for years. My father's funeral. That's supposed to be a somber, respectful event. Instead, my world cracked open when I saw a message notification pop up on my phone in the middle of the reception. I was supposed to be focusing on my dad, but my eyes locked onto the screen like a magnet. The message was from a number I didn't recognize, but the words made my stomach turn. "It's been months, we can finally be free. Can't wait to start our new life together." My breath hitched. I read it twice, then three times, feeling like someone had thrown cold water over me. My mind refused to process it. I looked around, trying to find some shred of normalcy, but everything felt surreal: the muffled voices, the scent of burnt coffee in the air, the uneven shuffle of black shoes on polished marble. I've always known she was capable of sneaking around. She was charming, seductive even, with that smile that made you forget how dangerous she was. But this, during my father's funeral, that was different. That was cold. I clenched my fists, palms sweaty, and my heart beat so hard I thought I'd pass out. I spent the next few minutes pretending to be okay, but inside I was boiling. The world had tilted. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to ask how she could do this while I was mourning. Instead, I slipped away to the car, the phone still trembling in my hand. I stared at the message again, trying to find some meaning in it, anything that made sense of the betrayal. She was supposed to be grieving with me. My wife, the woman I loved, had betrayed me not just once but in the most horrifying way. She cheated on me with my best friend during my father's funeral, while I was cracked open, grieving for the man who raised me. That thought made my stomach churn. I knew I had to find out everything. There had to be more evidence, more clues. I remembered seeing her phone earlier that day, laughing with her friend, whispering in a way that seemed too intimate. But I dismissed it as nothing. Now I realized how wrong I'd been. The next few hours were a blur. I went home trying to act normal, but every step felt like walking on shattered glass. I kept replaying that message in my head, the words echoing louder each time. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. But mostly I felt the sting of knowing she had been planning this behind my back, while I was at my father's side, drowning in grief. That night I couldn't sleep. Instead, I stayed up and dug through her phone, desperate for answers. I found the messages they exchanged. Flirtatious, secret, and full of promises. I saw pictures she'd sent him, the kind of pictures that made my stomach turn. My wife, in her most vulnerable moments, was already imagining a life with him. I felt something soulless take root inside me. A plan started forming. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not without a fight. I had to be smart. I had to be careful. I decided I'd gather all the proof I could find and confront them both when I was ready. I needed to see their faces when I told them I knew everything. I needed to make them feel the cold weight of betrayal. I kept thinking about how they'd planned this, how they must have been so confident I wouldn't find out. That's what made it worse. They thought I was blind, that I'd never discover what they were doing behind my back. But I'm not stupid. I knew I had to be tactical. No accusations without proof, no rash actions. I'd get everything I needed, then I'd strike back. I looked around my quiet house, feeling the walls close in. I wondered how I'd ever look at her the same way again. Everything she'd said, every touch, every laugh, was it all a lie? I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. My stomach twisted with a mix of grief and rage. The night was long and sleep was impossible. All I could think about was the moment I'd finally confront her, face to face, with the proof in my hand. I swore that when I was ready, I'd make them both regret ever crossing me. That's when I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming what little dignity I had left. Next part. The days that followed felt like being underwater, everything slow, muffled, like I was watching my life through a thick glass. I knew I needed to gather more evidence, so I started digging deeper into her phone and her online activity. I couldn't believe how easy it was. She was sloppy, overly confident, leaving clues everywhere. I found the chat logs she'd forgotten to delete, messages with him about secret meetings, plans to meet at that shabby motel outside town. They talked about sneaking around, about the nights they'd spend together, making it sound like some kind of forbidden adventure. I read how they joked about me, how she said she'd finally be free when I was at the funeral, as if I wasn't even there. The sight of those messages made my stomach churn again. I felt my jaw clench so hard that my teeth ached. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. I felt a rage bubbling up, hotter than I'd ever experienced. I couldn't believe she'd been planning this so far in advance, all while I was burying my father. I needed to see her in person. I had to confront her face to face, not just through texts. I decided to wait until I had everything, proof that sealed the deal. I knew she'd be back home that evening, probably thinking I was clueless. That's when I would show her what I'd uncovered. I wanted her to feel the chaos she'd caused, to see her face when I revealed her lies. That day I kept my cool, but inside I was boiling. I sat on the couch, staring at her empty chair, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I could hardly breathe. My palms were sweaty and my heart pounded so loud I thought she might hear it if she came near. I kept telling myself, this isn't just about revenge. It's about finally ending the lies. When she finally got home, I greeted her with a calm that was entirely fake. She looked at me, eyes bright but slightly cautious. She probably sensed something was off. I didn't say much at first, just kept the silence heavy. Then I handed her my phone, the screen glowing with the chat logs. I watched her face turn pale, her eyes flickering with shock and something else, probably guilt. She stammered, "What is this? I don't know what you're—" I cut her off coldly. "You've been lying to me, to both of us. Honestly, I don't even know who you are anymore." Her lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she tried to brush it off, saying how it was just a moment of weakness and it doesn't mean anything. That's when I felt my fists tighten again, my voice rising. "Don't insult my intelligence. I saw the pictures, the messages. You planned this. You cheated on me with my best friend and I was too blind to see it, was I?" She looked like she wanted to crawl into a hole. She said nothing, just stared at her shoes. That was my cue. I told her I'd had enough. I was done being the fool, but I didn't just want to walk away. I needed to make her feel the pain she'd caused me, the betrayal that shattered what little trust was left. That's when I revealed my plan to her. My carefully thought-out revenge. I told her I'd been secretly recording her conversations, capturing every lie she'd told. I'd been documenting her movements, her calls, everything that could prove her guilt. I planned to show her that I was always one step ahead. I would make her regret ever crossing that line. She looked terrified, and I could see the realization dawned on her. This wasn't going to be a quick, easy fix. I told her I'd give her one last chance to come clean, to tell me the truth before I exposed everything to the world. "I'm not stupid," I said through gritted teeth. "You might think you're clever, but I've got proof, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you really are." The air between us thickened. She finally broke her silence, whispering, "Please don't do this. I love you. It was a mistake, I swear." I cut her off, not because I believed her, but because I knew this wasn't over. I had more plans brewing, plans that would make her regret every single moment she betrayed me. I knew I was dangerous now, and I wanted her to understand that I was not the man who'd forgive her so easily. I told her she'd regret ever crossing me. I wasn't just going to end this. It was only the beginning. Next part, that night I didn't sleep. My mind kept racing through all the steps I'd take, how to finally execute my plan. I'd spent days gathering proof, and now I was ready to strike. I wasn't just going to confront her with the truth. I wanted her to feel every bit of the chaos she'd caused. I knew she'd try to spin her way out, but I had everything lined up. I made a list of what I needed, the evidence I'd collected, a few strategic contacts, and my own calm resolve. The plan was simple but brutal: expose her in a way she couldn't deny, make her see the damage she'd done. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal crushing her, just like it had crushed me. The first step was to prepare the scene. I found a way to record her conversations secretly, using a small device I bought online. It wouldn't be obvious. I also downloaded all the chat logs, pictures, and the location details. I was meticulous. I wanted everything to be undeniable, bulletproof. That evening, I waited until she was in the other room, distracted by her phone. I slipped into the kitchen, set up my device, and pressed record. My pulse hammered in my ears. I was finally doing this, confronting her with the truth, not just in words but with the proof. When I was done, I sat back quietly, my stomach twisting with anticipation. I felt a strange calm, like this was the moment I'd been waiting for. I knew she'd come to me soon, probably sensing I'd uncovered something. When she did, I was ready. She entered the room and looked at me, her eyes flickering with nervousness. I held up the phone. "I want you to hear this," I said, voice steady but filled with quiet fury. "All your lies, all your plans, I didn't just find out. You told him you wanted to leave me, didn't you?" Her face drained of color. She stammered, "It's not what you think. I didn't mean for it to get this far." I cut her off, voice cold. "You don't get to explain anymore. I've got the recordings, the chat logs, everything. You weren't just planning to cheat, you were planning to leave me just like that. During my father's funeral, while I was breaking inside, you were making plans with him." She looked like she wanted to crawl away, but I wasn't letting her. I wanted her to see what she'd done. "You thought I was blind. You thought I'd never find out. Well, congratulations. I have everything, and I'm not just going to leave quietly." I told her I'd record her confession, then post everything online if she didn't come clean. I wanted her to understand she'd burned her bridges. She tried to deny it once more, tears streaming down her face, but I knew better. This wasn't about guilt. It was about her refusal to face reality. As she sat there trembling, I realized how much I'd been betrayed. My body clenched tight, feeling the same surge of rage that had been building for days. I wasn't just going to walk away, I was going to make her pay. I had a plan to make her regret every second of her deception. I told her I'd be giving her a choice. Come clean, tell me everything, or I would expose her lies. I wanted to see her break, to see her realize that her perfect facade was crumbling. It was just a matter of time now. Before I left the room, I handed her a small envelope. Inside was a single key. She looked at me in confusion. I said, "That's the key to your new apartment. You're moving out tomorrow. I suggest you start packing." Her eyes widened. She knew I meant business. That was the last thing I said before walking away. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. I'd finally taken control, but I also knew the storm was just beginning. And somehow I relished that. I'd spent years being the loyal husband, the friend who never doubted her. Now I was finally taking back my life, piece by piece. I had no idea what would come next, but I knew one thing: she'd regret betraying me during the hardest time of my life. Next part. The next morning, I felt like I was walking on a thin wire. The air was cold and the house felt emptier than ever. Her suitcase sat by the door, already half-packed. I watched her move around in silence, her eyes red-rimmed, but her face set in stubborn silence. She hadn't spoken a word since I handed her that key. I stayed in the living room, arms crossed, trying to keep my composure. Inside, though, I was boiling. I knew she'd try to make a play for mercy, or at least some kind of apology, but I wasn't interested in that anymore. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done. She finally looked at me and said, "This isn't fair. I made a mistake, but I love you. Can't we just talk about this?" Her voice was trembling, but her eyes were daring me to believe her. I shook my head slowly. "You don't get to play the victim now. You've lied, betrayed me, and planned to run away with him while I was mourning my father. You think I'm just going to forget that? I've got everything on record. I don't need to listen anymore. I already know what you are." Her face crumpled, and for a moment I saw the woman I once loved, distant, fragile, broken. But that fleeting softness was replaced by defiance fast enough. She said, "Fine. You want to throw me out. Just remember, you're pushing away the only person who truly cares about you." I couldn't keep my voice from rising. "Care? You think I care about you after this? No, I care about the guy thought I knew, not the liar I've been living with." I reached for the envelope I'd put on the table earlier. Inside was a document I had drafted, something legal, something binding. I handed her a pen. "Sign this. It's a separation agreement. No more games, no more lies. Once you sign, we're done." Her hands shook as she took the paper. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of weakness. I felt a strange satisfaction watching her try to hold it together. She looked at the document, then at me, and finally she signed with a trembling hand. As she finished, I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You're leaving my life for good. Don't come back. Don't try to contact me. If I find out you've lied again, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did." She nodded, a defeated look on her face. She turned to grab her suitcase and headed toward the door. That's when she paused and looked back at me. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're going to regret this." I felt nothing but a cold, sharp relief. I'd finally taken control. I'd cut out the cancer that had been poisoning me. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now I had clarity. I watched her walk out, suitcase in hand, and with every step she took away from my house, I felt a strange mixture of liberation and emptiness. That's when I realized I'd have to confront the fallout, what everyone would say, what my friends would think, and how I'd rebuild what was left of my life. But I was ready. I also knew I had one more task to do, something I'd been planning quietly in my mind ever since I discovered her betrayal. A final move that would make sure she understood the full extent of what she'd lost. I decided to send a message, not hidden in secret but loud and clear. It was time to show her the consequences of her actions, and she'd regret every second she thought she could cheat her way out of this. Next part. The day after she left, the house was eerily silent. I'd expected some relief, but instead I felt hollow. All that built-up anger and planning had culminated in her walking out the door. I looked around, and everything seemed to echo her absence, the empty space where her things used to be, the silence that hung in the air like a heavy fog. I spent the morning setting everything in motion. I contacted a lawyer, handed over the evidence I'd gathered, and finalized the divorce papers. I wanted this mess over with. But I also had one final move, a way to make sure her betrayal wouldn't be forgotten, and that she'd see the damage she'd caused. While she was still out, I drafted a detailed letter. It wasn't just a breakup letter, it was a statement, a recounting of everything I'd uncovered, every lie, every moment she betrayed me. I included screenshots, chat logs, and dates. I wanted her to see that I'd been watching, that I'd been waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew she'd try to spin it, try to convince herself she'd get away with it, but I was determined to make her regret it. The letter would be sent to her family, and I'd post parts of it online if I had to. I wanted everyone to know what kind of person she was: deceptive, selfish, unfaithful. I sealed the envelope with a sense of finality. Then I made sure it was delivered by a courier, precisely timed so she'd get it that afternoon. I sat back and watched her reaction from afar, knowing she'd be blindsided. When her phone buzzed with the delivery confirmation, I felt a strange satisfaction. That evening, I went out for a walk to clear my head. The cool air brushed against my skin, and I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through me. I thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I'd gained by finally taking control. My mind kept replaying her face, her defiance, her tears, and that sickening look of guilt when she realized she'd been caught. I kept telling myself I deserved better. I deserved honesty, loyalty, respect. And now that I'd taken her out of my life, I was finally free to rebuild on my own terms. I knew there would be scars. This kind of betrayal leaves deep wounds, but I was determined to heal. Then, almost on cue, my phone buzzed. I hesitated before opening the message. It was her, an apology, she said, a plea for forgiveness, begging me to believe she was truly sorry. It was exactly what I expected. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. I didn't reply. Instead, I pressed delete and turned off the phone. That moment, I felt a surge of clarity. Her words didn't matter anymore. What mattered was my future, not her lies. I'd already proven I could stand on my own. I'd won. But the thing about revenge is it never really ends. Not entirely. I knew she'd carry the weight of her betrayal forever, just as I would carry the scars. Still, I felt lighter, freer. I'd taken back what was mine, and I'd finally closed that chapter. As I walked back home, I realized I'd learned something crucial. Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes it's the only way to see who someone truly is. And if you're brave enough, you can come out stronger on the other side, scarred, yes, but no longer a victim. Next part. In the days that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding what I'd lost, piece by piece. It wasn't easy. There were moments when loneliness hit hard and memories of her still haunted me. But I kept reminding myself that I finally took control. I'd faced the chaos, exposed her lies, and walked away with my dignity intact. I made a point to cut ties with the people I once trusted who might have taken her side. I didn't want any lingering doubts, no what-ifs, or maybe this was all a mistake. I knew what I'd seen, what I'd uncovered. That was my truth, the truth that set me free. I didn't tell everyone right away, but I didn't hide either. I shared my story carefully, hoping others who might be in similar situations could learn from my experience. Betrayal is brutal, but it's also revealing. It teaches you who truly cares and who doesn't. I learned to listen to my instincts more closely. Looking back, I realized the betrayal was a catalyst. I finally saw her for what she really was. Not the woman I'd loved, but someone who betrayed everything we stood for. It hurt, yeah, but it also cleared the fog. I started to see the signs I'd missed and understood that sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself again. I've moved on not because I forget, but because I choose to no longer be defined by her actions. I found new routines, new people, and a renewed sense of purpose. I still feel the sting of her betrayal, but it's less sharp now. It's just part of my story, a chapter I refuse to let define me. And in the end, I realized something important. Revenge isn't just about hurting someone else. It's about reclaiming your power, standing up for your worth, and choosing to move forward. That's what I did. I took back my life, piece by piece, knowing I deserved better from the start. So if there's one thing I want anyone reading this to take away, it's this. Betrayal cuts deep, but it's also a mirror. It shows your strength, your resilience, and your ability to start over. No matter how shattered you feel, there's always a way to rebuild. You just have to be willing to face the pain and do the work. Now I can finally breathe again, deep, steady breaths, and look ahead. The past will always be a part of me, but it doesn't define where I'm going. I've learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to truly find yourself. And that's exactly what I did.